Hey, I'm Nick with Jaws Hog Tactical. Today we're going to talk about some differences between our act clearance tactic and working from outside of the doorway compared to the deliberate dynamic entry that's been ran for years. So especially working in a one-man setting, whether you're a law enforcement officer responding to a call or whether you're a law-abiding citizen who's running home defense, there's some different thought processes behind what's going on here. So if you're clearing this room right here, old school dynamic button hook crisscrosses, we're dumping into the room, we're running our corners 12 inches off the wall, and we're digging our sectors of fire, which is really hard to do if you're a one man or you're running a law enforcement clearance by yourself, or if you're a civilian who's doing a home defense type situation. So one of the things we teach in the act clearance tactic is working from outside of the doorway, fighting from the threshold, using whatever cover we can, i.e. what the walls are made of, the interior walls, the drywall, the studs, the metal, the wood inside of that to help give us some sort of ballistic protection and the concealment of it. So for the act tactic, we're going to hit angles, right? Gunfighting is all about angles, angles of cover, angles of fire, angles of approach, angles of ingress, angles of egress. So we're going to teach you how to hit these angles properly and working these angles and taking as much of that room as you can from the outside and processing the information, thinking before shooting, outside of the dynamic entry where I'm here and I'm button hook and digging a corner there, or I'm crisscross entry if I'm running a two-person movement and where one goes right, two goes left. So some of the concepts, and I'm not arguing, a threshold assessment style tactic versus a dynamic, right? Mission drives the tactics. What are you doing and why are you doing it? It depends on what your operational tempo is, whether it be military, law enforcement, or a law-abiding gun owner. Just know why you're doing it. Make sure you're doing the research behind the tactic and how it applies to your operational environment. So one of the things that you'll see with law enforcement and with military, and I encourage you to look it up in the videos, thousands of hours of law enforcement involved shootings, as well as military combat engagements overseas. So I'd really encourage you to do your own research, look at statistics, look at videos, and kind of compare some of the different tactics that are being ran both by foreign militaries, U.S. military, as well as law enforcement agencies all across the United States, as well as other countries. And one thing you'll see a lot, especially in open air environments on the corners of a building, is when you have military personnel, law enforcement officer, if there's a possible threat around this corner and I'm coming from this building, you're not really just jumping out in an open air environment and closing the distance and finishing the fight. You'll see guys, they'll stutter step or they'll pause and they'll take that angle off the corner of the structure on the outside of the structure, using that as some type of cover or concealment. So they'll come here and they'll pause and then they'll hit that and then they'll roll out and get it. So my question to you is, if you're doing this on the outside of a structure, if you're using man-made cover / concealment to help give you that little bit of an edge, and you're taking that shutter step or shuffle step, or you're pausing and you're taking what you have before you come out, how is it any different than a room? Because it's still an unknown area, you're still kind of dumping in there. So why would you change your tactic unless, always and never, mission drives the tactics. Why would you operate different on the outside of the structure and bring yourself dynamically out of cover, but yet go into a room in an isolated area and dump yourself in there? Now again, not arguing tactic versus tactic, just giving you guys something to think about. So I'd encourage you to know your operational environment, know your capabilities, know your limitations, and know why you're doing what you're doing through training, through research, etc. So now we're on the outside of the structure, whether we arrived in our vehicle or we're making the approach to the structure from a vehicle or from an open area, whatever the case may be, right? So as we're working through here, again, coming back into using whatever cover or concealment we have available, and everything plays back into CQB. Mission should always drive the tactics should never drive the mission. It's not one tactic that fits all. So just like in CQB, when it comes to making your threshold assessment or how we're teaching in our adaptive clearance tactic, to where we're picking up as much information from the outside of the room before we make that entry, before we prep to make that entry, we're doing the same thing here as we're making our approach on the structure. If I'm working or I'm approaching a structure, wherever I'm trying to get from point A to point B, I want to always use whatever cover or concealment I can to help provide myself with some sort of safety. That way, if I do take rounds or I start to be engaged, I can dip back in and I can use what's given to me to help provide some sort of ballistic protection or some sort of concealment to mask my movements. So again, just like inside of the structure, if I'm treating this as a doorway, if I'm making an approach, I'm not just dumping out here into the open to where now I'm kind of out here in no man's land. I'm going to work what cover I have. I'm going to come up as I'm making my approach. I'm going to get a little pause and we'll see what I got, or take that smaller shuffle step. And then I'm going to kind of skirt around this vehicle so that if I were to take fire or I were to take rounds from whatever direction, I can now use the cover that's given to me, and I'm not stuck trying to make a decision or working through my OODA process out into an open area. So keep in mind, positioning and distance and how fast you process information is how fast you can move through OODA. And if I'm stuck out in the open and I'm in a bad position, I'm much more likely to stay in my low brain mentality compared to if I'm set up on a good position where I'm using the cover that's available, same way that applies inside of the room. I'm a lot faster getting to my high brain, which is where you want to be. I want to be in that high brain information processing area. I'm Nick from Jawless Hog Tactical. Hey, thanks for tuning in and watching this portion of the series. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to see or any kind of comments, hit us up. We're always looking for feedback. Follow us on social media. Check us out at jawlesshogtactical.com. I'd like to give a big shout out to HRT Tactical Gear for helping support us.